What is up, everybody? Mr. Purse here. Welcome to Unit 4. Again, this is on transoceanic interconnectedness. A lot of words, but basically just meaning across oceans, we're going to interconnect people, whether by force or voluntary trade. And this is 4.4. We're talking about the Europeans in Latin America. And if you don't know where Latin America is, just a quick FYI, we're looking at pretty much Mexico on south. And for the most part, AP World usually considers this area here in the Caribbean, part of Latin America as well, although it's up for debate, but let's just keep it nice and simple for now. One thing I want to point out before we get into anything is I just want to show you on this map that we are using existing trade routes. So trade routes that existed in the past, like a lot of this unit is about new stuff. So new interaction, new markets, new economic system, a lot of newness. But I do want to point out that for the most part, these Europeans are really just injecting themselves into a trade route that has existed already, which is the Indian Ocean trade. And if you remember from Unit 1 and 2, this trade route is really dominated by people in South Asia, by Islamic merchants, by the Chinese. And because of a whole bunch of issues, the Europeans are able to kind of push into this. And it's going to cause some conflict, which we'll get into in another section. But I do just want to point that out. When we talk about Latin America, we're really looking at Spain and Portugal. So they're the two primary countries. The Dutch get in here a little bit in what's known as Guyana, but I want to hold off on that and really just focus on Spanish Latin America for the most part in this video. No offense to the Portuguese or the Dutch. And really the first place I want to go is there's two empires that exist here in the 14 and early 1500s in Latin America that are major. Now there's other groups here. It's not just the Aztec and Inca and the rest is like abandoned area. There are smaller groups that have taken over different areas here, but the main two that are empires are the Aztec and the Inca. We got the Aztec in modern day Mexico and the Inca really in the Andes Mountains here along the west coast of South America. And when the Spanish arrived in the early 1500s, basically we're talking like 1511 to the 1530s when the Spanish really arrive in these two, into these two empires. The Spanish have a couple major advantages. So number one, we talked about this in Unit 3, but we got gunpowder. And the Spanish have gunpowder and the Aztecs and the Incas don't. It's a huge, obvious advantage. Number two, like we talked about in 4.3 with the Columbian Exchange, the Spanish are bringing with them diseases that the Aztec and the Incas don't have any immunity to and have never seen before, so it's going to decimate the population. And number three, these two empires in the 1400s conquered people who weren't Aztec or didn't consider themselves essentially part of the Incan Empire, and they don't like the people that conquered them. So when the Spanish come in, they see an avenue to overthrow the people that they don't like. So some groups team up with the Spanish to overthrow the Aztec and team up with the Spanish to overthrow the Incan government. And when they're done, the Spanish are going to kind of turn on these groups that help them out in the process. So we have a couple features here that really put the Europeans at an advantage and the Aztec and the Inca at a disadvantage. In terms of how the Spanish are going to run this empire, they are going to set the king, who is an absolute monarch and has total control over Spain, is going to set up a government structure with what are called viceroyals or viceroys. And this really refers to a vice royalty, or almost like a vice king in a sense, where you are appointed as head of a region in Spanish Latin America, and you therefore are going to carry out the laws of your absolute monarch and your king who you swear allegiance to. Originally, there are two viceroyals or viceroys. One is in Mexico here, and the other is down here in Peru, which is where the Aztec and the Inca Empire is. But as the Spanish expand this territory to what you see here in yellow, they break it up into four areas, which is basically New Spain, Granada here, Peru, and then Rio de la Plata down here in central South America. These viceroyals are going to hold military, administrative, and political power. Now, they have to carry out the laws of the king. They're not independent. What the king says they have to do, they must do. But for the most part, the day-to-day operations they're pretty independent. They just can't contradict what the king requires of them. And part of this is it takes so long to communicate at this point between Spain and Latin America, that you have to give them at least a little bit of day-to-day control, because you can't constantly communicate. It's not like modern day technology where you can shoot out an email real quick and be like, this is what I want you to do today. So they are expected to carry out the laws of the mother country. Number 2, economically, Spanish Latin America is going to be ruled as a mercantilism or mercantilism, depending upon who you taught and who you learned from. Both are acceptable. Where the colonies, Spanish Latin America, is going to send raw materials. These are goods that are chopped down, harvested, or mined. So you got the original product, the cotton that was picked off of the cotton plant, or the silver that was mined, or the logs that were cut down, and you're going to send them back on boats to Spain. Spain is then going to take those raw materials and make them into finished products, chairs, necklaces, cotton material, textile clothing, and then send it back and sell it to the colonial country. The problem with this is that the mother country sets the price on how much they will buy the raw material for, and sets the price on how much they will sell the good back for. So basically what this does is the colony has to buy or sell the raw material at a low price to Spain. So Spain is making money because it's a cheap product. And then in return, they are selling it at a much higher price for the finished goods. So Spain is making up the difference, and that money is flowing out of the Latin American country or the region into European hands. So it's very unequal, and it's really going to be a cause of poverty for generations and centuries to come, including modern day Latin America. It's one of the major issues that they face. 2 is silver. Silver makes the world go round at this point. It's the main source of currency in terms of trading. And silver mines are going to be discovered in Mexico, but mainly down here in what was formerly the Inca Empire. And when the Spanish discover these silver mines, they are going to put the Latin Americans to work. And this silver is going to flow out of Latin America, so it's Spanish silver, and it's going to be used to purchase goods in China. And at this point, in 1500s, we're still talking about Ming China, the Zheng He exploration. That's the Ming Empire. They love the silver, and they're going to take the silver. They're going to use that silver, and the silver from Spain is going to be used to purchase goods. The Spanish are going to take those goods and bring them and sell them around the world and bring them back to Spain. So much silver flows from Latin America to China that it leads to massive inflation in Ming China. And Ming China is eventually going to fall and be replaced by the Manchu dynasty, the Qing, which is the gunpowder empire from Unit 3. So just a little interconnectedness here. Culturally, we're going to set up a race-based social class structure called the casta system that we will talk more about in class. But essentially, it breaks it down that these are, at the top are peninsulares. They're Spanish born. They're born in Spain. We got the Creoles. They are they're people of Spanish born parents, or people who are full-blooded Spanish, but are born in Latin America. So they're a step below. Then we got people of mixed heritage, which is, it's usually Spanish and people of native descent. And then we have Native American Indians, and at the bottom, enslaved people, which are people usually of African descent. The Peninsulares here at the top, who are born in Spain, are the only people who are allowed to work and serve in the government. And then underneath them, with the Creoles, them and the Peninsulares are the only people allowed to be in the military. So this class-based structure, which is based on race, determines what you have access to. And obviously, you can imagine over time, we're going to have segregated or different schools who has access to education, which is really going to be only the Peninsulares and Creoles. And it's going to cause some major problems. But we'll talk more about that in class. Also, we have 2 forced labor systems that are going to be used. Forced labor system 1 is, first of all, this is all about cash crops. We are trying to harvest cash crops, things that Europeans have wanted: cotton, sugar. Eventually, they're going to find out about tobacco, tea. Now we have a climate that is suitable to grow these things. When in Europe, we couldn't grow these things. So it's going to be all about the cash crops. And the Europeans are going to put into place a couple forced labor systems where you're forcing people to do labor for you. The first one is called the encomienda system. The king in Spain is going to grant land to a conquistador. That conquistador has to follow the viceroy's laws, but they have pretty much autonomy or independence over their own piece of land. So the conquistador gets the lands and the people who are on that land, the native people, have to work for him. They can't be bought and sold, but they have to harvest or provide so many crops. That's called the encomienda system. That's mainly, we're going to see that in Mexico. In South America, we're going to see the Mita system, which if you remember from the Inca Empire, it was used as a term then. And it's a forced labor system in South America, okay, where the Incan people and the people who are under Incan control and now under Spanish control have to mine silver for the Spanish. And mining this silver is going to be very hard work. It's a horrendously awful thing. They're going to use the term Mita because they're going to take the Incan term for it, where that was really, under the Inca Empire, if you don't remember, it was really just a system where you were really trying to benefit the empire as a whole, building roads, building schools, public works. This is much more, you're going to mine silver for the Spanish so the Spanish can buy Chinese goods, essentially. Each town has to send 1/7 of their population every year. So over the course of 7 years, everyone essentially would have to go and mine. Mining is a horrible job at this point. Many people are going to die as a result of the mining of this silver. Really horrendous. And the one other thing that we'll really get into in the next unit is it's called chattel slavery. This is probably the slavery that you think about in your mind, in which slaves are going to be viewed as personal property. These are African slaves who are going to be brought over to the Americas and be forced into working for the Spanish. It's going to be much more common so this is a map of the number of slaves that came to the Americas and where they went. You will notice that in Latin America, at least in South America, there's very few people who are brought from Africa to the Americas enslaved. Most people who are enslaved are going to be brought, and this is true of the entire Americas, most enslaved Africans are going to be brought to Brazil, essentially what's modern day Brazil. We have a large number brought to the Caribbean because it's a large cash crop industry, meaning that they're going to grow crops. And then we have a number of people to North America as well. I don't want to get into this in this video. I really want to focus on it in the North America, but it is a horrible system, absolutely horrible. I'm gonna wrap that up here. That's all I got for this. This is really part one. We'll do one more part on Latin America that'll be a little shorter. As always, if you got any questions, write that thing down, bring it into class, let me know. I'm out. You know what? Let's just wrap this up. Why not? Let's just go a little bit longer here. So here's the last thing. A total fake out here. I'm pulling a new one for this video. Last but not least is religiously. So here's what's going to go on religiously. The Spanish are going to force native people to convert to Catholicism. That was one of the goals of this exploration to begin with, is for God and the belief that God wants you to convert people who are non-believers. So the Spanish are going to come in and essentially force the Native Americans in Spanish Latin America and in Portuguese Latin America to convert to Catholicism. So if you know today, most people in Latin America are Catholic, and that is as a result of Spanish forced conversion. However, they're going to syncretize this with their own localized beliefs. And in this case, we're going to see something that is referred to as the cult of saints. Now, this is Roman Catholicism, but it's almost this worship, and we see a little bit of this in Europe, it's a worship of specific saints, almost as if that those saints are God, God his or herself. And in this case, we're going to see Catholic saints who are going to be blended with Latin American characteristics. They're usually going to be worshipped in a similar fashion to God. If you go to Latin American countries, you can see this as, for example, like candles that are going to be burned with pictures of, like this is the Virgin Mary. But if you look at this closely, like there's very much Latin American characteristics to this, Latin American imagery. And that is kind of this cult of saint where, for example, you might burn a candle with the Virgin Mary on it, or some other saint in order to specifically pray, which is a little less common in Europe, and we're going to see that much more in Latin America. So we're going to see this syncretization, I don't even know if that's a word, of the two. Now for real, that's all I got. You got any questions? Let me know. I'm out.